Hello and welcome to Honest Bible Talk. Today we're going to be discussing a rather interesting facet of the nature of God. This is something that is not really directly addressed in the Bible itself, but is rather an assessment of how the events take place in the Bible. And I'm talking, of course, of whether God has a predetermined plan or allows free will. So when we read the Bible and think upon the nature of God, questions like this usually raise more questions rather than provide answers, and this is no exception. So what we're asking here is whether God's already planned out the events of the future and knows what will happen already, or again, if He allows free will in human beings and gives them some room to plot their own course. So the idea of free will versus determinism is an old question. It's one still debated in modern psychology, and it has its proponents on both sides. The reason it's so important to us as humans is that it literally affects every decision we make. Maybe we're choosing our own path, following a pattern of cause and effect, or perhaps the course of our lives is already set in stone, unable to be influenced. When we read the book of Genesis, it reveals much about how God sees events unfolding within our universe. The beginning of the Bible tells of the account of the creation, which of course culminates on the sixth day with the creation of a human being and then the seventh day of rest. According to the Bible, this creation is the first set of events and the first action taken by any being, at least in this universe. At the end of each day of creation, God saw that it was good. No matter how these initial events unfolded, whether through predeterminism or a willful decision by God, God seemed to be happy with the results. Now, after humans created within the paradise of the Garden of Eden, God said it's not good for the man to be alone, and He decides to make a helper that's suitable for him. Now, it might be implied here that the original plan was for a single man to live in paradise forever. This is analogous to the modern concept of heaven in Christianity, which, according to the Bible, is still attainable by humans. We see here, however, that God either waited to see how the lone human would fare in the garden, kind of like an experimental observation, or He originally had a plan and altered course. It's not really explicitly stated whether or not all of this was predetermined, so it's hard to answer the question from this passage alone. So the first major deviation from God's original plan comes when the humans eat from the fruit of the tree of life. This disobedience caused God to banish the humans from the garden and live in the world outside, where they would be forced to work in order to survive. The doctrine of original sin also states that this action caused all sin and pain to come into the world, which was not present in God's original plan, and that all humans inherit the legacy of Adam and Eve's disobedience, forever altering the course of humanity. And this is only the first of several events in the Bible that depict God as making a decision only after events take place on earth. Another example is when Abraham acted as an intercessory for the people of the wicked city of Sodom. God was originally going to destroy the city, but Abraham asked God to spare the city from destruction if there are 50 righteous people within the city. Abraham then sort of haggles with God to take this number down to 10 righteous people. He's then allowed to go to Sodom to find these righteous people. Of course, in this case, God destroyed the city anyway, but only after the conversation with Abraham. There's also the subject of prophecy, which has a huge impact on this topic. So this is when either God Himself or one of His prophets predicts the future. This does kind of throw a wrench into this debate, and it seems to introduce a more complex but still workable framework, where the major predicted events will come to pass no matter what. The questions of when and how such events will take place might still be changeable. It's said in James chapter 5, verse 16, that the prayer of a righteous person is powerful and effective. Many other examples exist of a righteous person piously praying for God to change his mind about something. Whether the answer is yes, no, or something in between, God seems to be able to be influenced. But as paradoxical as it sounds, even this influence can be predetermined. Parts of the nature of God will forever remain inaccessible to humanity. Psychology raises questions with answers that contradict themselves and are only resolved with the trust that God can be and is all possibilities. From the scripture, we can understand that the righteous can petition God in order to influence him, but also that God is all-knowing and has had a plan for humanity in place all along. If you must have an answer to the question of whether God has a predetermined plan or allows free will, the answer is neither, both, and something in between. Because, like the ultimate answer to most questions about God, the answer is that God is everything.